Yes.
Okay, guys, let's go. I hope you are all awake. So, the idea today is to explain a bit and go over the concepts of Civitia. I think it will be both interesting for newbie and advanced players. So, the idea is to go from left to right, from a more basic gameplay to a more advanced gameplay. So, as you all may know, Civitia is a hyper-financialized game. So almost all the mechanisms and features are more similar to a DeFi protocol rather than a game. And I also think Civitia is better explained by just playing over the board. But I think it will be cool to have this whiteboard session and try to explain and see all the concepts together. Let me see if I can draw. Okay. Yeah. So let's go. First of all, I will go over a basic gameplay of the game, which involves the game board and the players. Oh my god, I'm so bad at drawing, sorry. And then we'll go over the more advanced seasoned gameplay. So I guess all of you may know that Civitia is a board game, so obviously it has a game board. And players interact with that game board, and over the game board we have cities and special squares, which all of them have different types of features. So on the terms of players, let's say, it's important to see that you need to be careful about two main things. One is the player level, and the other are the currencies that the game uses. So in terms of levels, I guess it's quite different than other board games. And it's not particularly happening in other financial board games like Monopoly, but we wanted to have like some real life features. So here, as you advance on the game, so let's say that you start as a poor player. Wow, this is so big. You start as a poor player, it means that you have from 0 to 19 cities. So the objective of Civitia is to acquire as much cities as you can in a strategic way. So it's not to acquire all of the cities or different cities. You need your own strategy to make the most yield that you can make. As it's a hyper financialized game, the objective is to get the most yield that you can over your portfolio. So let's say that as you start to have more cities and hold more cities, it gets actually worse, because here addition is once you have 100 units. So when you start to go down on the player level, it's actually worse, because to move over the board, you need to pay more. Okay, so as in other games such as Monopoly, you move over the board and you land on cities. Those cities are owned by other players and you have to pay rent. So for instance, if you are a poor player and you land on New York, for example, if New York has 1 unit rent, if you are a poor player, you will still pay 1 unit. But if you are a decent player, you will pay 10x the amount. So you will pay 10 unit instead of 1. So you have to be careful about that. It is a simple mechanic, but it basically makes it more difficult for advanced players and rich players to move, and they have to be more careful. I think this is pretty basic. Then we can go over currencies. The game uses init as the main currency, so you will use init for almost everything on the game, such as paying rents, as the example before, minting units, burning units, and interacting with the special squares. So init is the main currency of the game. Then we have tax points, which are a bit more advanced. This is a utility token, so it is not tradable outside the game, and it only has utility inside Civitia. We will see how it affects the game later on. And then we have gold and silver, which are the soul bone tokens, similar to a points system. Gold is right now deprecated because it was only used for testnet v1. So testnet v1 players will be able to claim gold for mainnet, and they will have it always on their mainnet balances. And then we have silver, which is going to be the points system for mainnet. And this is tied to the Initia VIP. That means that if Civitia is able to attract a good allocation for the Initia VIP epochs, players of Civitia will be able to get that emissions by playing the game. That means that I think for mainnet is 2 weeks epochs for VIP. So imagine we have 1 million in it on the first epoch. The distribution across the players on Civitia will be completely linear and tied to silver. So if people have farmed 100,000 silver on the first epoch, then a player that has farmed 1K of silver will be basically entitled to 1% of the whole 1 million in it on the VIP epoch. So basically, it's another incentive to play Civitia that it's not from the game itself. It's actually coming from the layer 1 emissions, and it's tied to the Initia VIP mechanism, which means that you have to try to invest those init tokens as you wish and in the different mechanisms that Initia has. So yeah, I think this is really cool because it mixes our own syncs from the game together with Initia itself. So now let's see how these currencies interact with the game board. So on the game board, you can land on cities. Basically, 18 squares are cities, and then we have 4 squares that will be special squares. Right now it's only 3, but we'll have another one for mainnet. Cities are divided into normal cities, which are 12, and then we have seasonal cities, which are basically a subset of cities. But the most important thing to look is normal cities. Basically, seasonal cities are just a way of finishing sets, which are groups of cities. So each week, those seasonal cities are reset completely. And for you, in order to acquire a set, you have to be active and play in seasons, because you will need to mint those seasonal cities all over again to complete sets and therefore get rent boosts on your earnings. So let's go over how a normal city works. Let's say that I go over the board and I land on, I don't know, Rome, for example, and I want to mint 1 unit of that city. I will need to use init to mint it. Minting and burning is basically a bonding curve. So I don't know if most of you are familiar with that. I don't think you need to understand the mathematics behind, but it's basically how pump.fun works before making the pool public to Radium. So I think it's a pretty basic concept. Imagine that Rome has no mints. You can have, let's define a function. I don't want to go too deep, but this is the price of the city in init, and this is the n is the amount circulating, and then we have this function. Any city can have its own function. So if you go over the board, you will see that the most expensive cities are more volatile because they have curves that are much steep. So for each mint that happens of a city, the price increases more. So let's make this case. Imagine I'm the first player that lands on Rome, and it's going to be 0 because there are no Rome units minted. So my price for Rome will be 1 init. Okay. And then if another player comes and mints again Rome, he will be essentially paying 2 init in this case. And that goes all over again infinitely until someone mints for whatever price, but it doesn't stop. It's just supply and demand. And it's the same for burning the units. When you burn the unit, you don't need a counterparty to sell the unit. You are basically selling against the pool. So you are going from, if the total supply is 2, you are burning the last city here for 2 init. Therefore, what happens essentially is that the more mints a city has, the price is more expensive, and it gets expensive as more mints they are. So it's essentially just a curve, and there's no middleman. The liquidity goes directly to a pool, and you can burn against that pool. This is for everything that involves creating units, which is minting and burning units of a city. And then, as I mentioned before, when you land on a city, you're actually paying rent, and this rent is distributed to the holders of that city. So if we have Dubai, for example, and there are 3 holders, let's make it easy. I have Zone, for example, that owns 2 units. We have KP that owns 1 unit, and we have Stan, for example, that owns 1 unit. Every time someone pays the rent of Dubai, which is 1 init, for example, this init is completely distributed across these holders. So each time I land on Dubai, I am paying essentially zone 0.5 init, and those guys over here 0.25, okay, because they own 1/4 of Dubai. Obviously, this is much more complex because we have, as I said, rent boosts for sets, and we also have here on a more advanced gameplay boosts of rent coming from the residents. But essentially it's that. It's quite simple and straightforward. Obviously the numbers of mainnet and testnet are much higher, so it makes it much difficult to calculate, but it's essentially that. What else? Yeah, it's basically those concepts for minting, burning, and paying rents, which is the basic gameplay, I will say. And then we have tax points and contributions from incomes coming from seasons. At this level, is the level where you're playing passive, I will say. If you're not competing in seasons, your objective should be just to own cities and get yield from it. So you will not be able to affect actually net score or radiation levels, because you can only affect that if you're playing on the second order gameplay, which is the seasons. If you're playing on seasons, you can be a resident of a city and contribute to the score of the city, and you can also sabotage other cities. But yeah, net score is just basically the difference between contributions and sabotage. So if a city has 100 contributions and 50 sabotages, it is at a net score of 50, and this affects the radiation level. So the radiation level can go from 0 to 5 out of 5, and the more radiation there is, the less rent multiplier the city has. So this will be the more radiation, it will be the base rent. So if a rent is 1 init, it will be here. And as soon as the city starts to have less radiation because it has more contributions, the price of the base rent increases. So holders of a city should want to have a city with less radiation in order to have a better rent multiplier.
Sorry, G, you said, what did you say about radiation and contributions? The contributions part, I would like some more clarity on.
Yeah, it's basically that net score is the difference between contribution and sabotage, and then that net score defines the radiation of the city. Okay. So it depends on each game setting, but essentially it can go from negative infinite to infinite, And between those numbers, you can have, if you have a lot of negative scores, so if you go from -infinity to 0, you will have the base rent on a city. Let's make it one init. As soon as the city goes from 0 to, for example, 10K, then you have a multiplier here of the base rent. So the city starts to get better because it has more contributions and actually has a higher net score and less radiation. I think I can share. Are you seeing the screen? I think this is much easier to understand here. So the city starts at full radiation, and then as soon as it has better score, the rent starts to get a multiplier. And if the holders of a city are able to make the city to have a score higher than 100K, then the city means it has no radiation and the rent multiplier is 4x. So residents of a city want the city to have as much net score as they can. As I said, seasonal cities are the same as normal cities, but they don't have this net score and radiation concepts. So the radiation is actually increasing over time over a season. So on day 1 of a season is 7 days, the city has no radiation, 0 out of 5. And at the end of the season, the city ends with all of the radiation. So it's actually better if you mint the seasonal city at the beginning of a season and try to burn it here, because if not, you will lose the whole city because radiation will kill the city. I think this is better explained later on with the seasons concept, because on a whiteboard is quite complex, but let's go over the special squares, which is pretty fast. Special squares have their own mechanisms themselves. Like bunker is just a city that has only one owner. So every time a player mints the bunker, it is stealing it from another player. You essentially assume low risk because if, for example, right now KP is holding the bunker and he paid 100 init, if I land on the bunker and I mint it for 105, KP will be able to get his 100 init back minus a tax of 5%, but he will essentially not lose the amount he paid for the bunker. But you have to take into account that when you are minting the bunker, you are paying this 5% tax, which is 5 init in this case. You have to check if you are able to get those 5 init from the rents that you will be gathering. And you essentially have no clue about it because you don't know if somebody will mint it fast after you mint it or not. So that's the cool thing about the bunker. We are actually thinking about adding a cooldown period for mainnet. So let's see how we tweak it. But right now it's like this. You are essentially stealing from the other owner and you get all the rents from all the players while you hold it. Then we have the tax authority, which is essentially a way to incentivize people not to hold tax points until infinity and use it at the end of the season to attack cities. Because when you land on the tax authority, you are enforced to file taxes. And when you file taxes, you can either get a 2x on your TP or you get to 0. So it's essentially a way to gamble your TP for you not to hold it until the end of the season. And then we will go over the more complicated or the more advanced type of gameplay, which involves jail. and the season gameplay. So for this B2 testnet, players saw that we added jail. Jail is a square that gathers init from different types of mechanisms, but essentially when you land on jail, you have to choose between two options. You either pay a bailout or you try to bribe the officer. If you try to bribe the officer, your bribe can fail or succeed. If it succeeds, you pay less than the bail, but if not, you will end up paying more. But it's not worth it to go over the details now. It's just for you to understand that all this init is teleported to the jackpot together with other revenue streams that we haven't disclosed yet, but we will, and other mechanisms that are coming soon, as I said. Let's go over the season gameplay. To make it easy, seasons are 1 week epochs where players have to choose over their portfolio of cities. Let's say I have New York, I have Rome, and I have Dubai. If I want to play on a season, I need to choose one of my cities to have my residence in. And this is a difficult decision because you have to consider there's a bunch of things influencing that decision. One is that you are getting a rent boost on the city that you choose. The other is that you are competing for the jackpot rewards against the other cities. So you will need to choose, if you optimize for rents, you will need to choose a place where you own a lot of units because you will get a booster on that rent. And if you want to optimize for a city that has a lot of supporters, you will then choose or base your decision on the city that has more contributors that you like, because I will explain later, but you are fighting for the jackpot between cities. And then on top of it, you will earn additional rewards from other minitias or collaborations that we have or we will have ongoing, and then silver rewards. So let me explain this really quick. Imagine I have these 3 cities and I need to take one of them as a residence. From these cities, as default, I am getting the base rent boost, which is like 1x, the normal boost. And then if I choose, for example, Dubai as my residence, let's make a heart here. I am getting a boost on the rents of a 2x by default. And that is more interesting because there's a loyalty bonus. So as the seasons advance, for each season that I renew my residence, I am getting a 10% extra boost. So this scales until infinity. That means that at the 10th season, I can stack a multiplier of 3x. And basically, if I do a strategy where I try to mint as many units as Dubai as I can, and I gather a good rent boost, I can make it super worth it in terms of rent boost. This is a strategy that could work, but you also need to take into consideration that cities are fighting for the jackpot rewards. So basically, once you set your residence, you automatically contribute to that city. For each action that you take, if you have a minted residence, you are contributing to the city. So if I set my residence to Dubai and I pay 10 init in rents, those 10 points are going as contributions to Dubai. And the same happens with other holders. So user 1, resident 1, resident 2 and resident 3, if they have the residence in Dubai, they are all contributing to Dubai, to the net score of Dubai. That's why I didn't want to go too deep here, because I want to explain it now. So all those players are increasing their net score by their actions, because it's essentially a way that you are basically traveling around the world, but you have your residence in Dubai, therefore you are paying taxes there. So every action you do in other places, it contributes to your city because you will pay tax on it. So if those residents are good enough that they contribute a lot, Dubai will have a net score that is, for example, 10K, and it will be able to compete. Let me see. Let me show you, for example, the last season, for example, Seoul had a net score of 18 million and it gathered all the rewards. But if you see season 2, for example, it's much more distributed. So the scores of the cities make them win or not the jackpot rewards, depending on how it is distributed. But here the interesting part is that you should place your residence depending on two main factors. One is the rent boost, and the other is if your city can win the jackpot. And if it wins, imagine Dubai wins a 1 million jackpot, I will get a share of that jackpot linearly depending on the contributions that I've made. So if Dubai ends with a net score of 100K and I have contributed 1K, I will be getting 1% of the 1 million in it pool. So I will be getting 10K out of 10K in it, basically, just from jackpot. I mean, it's quite complex to explain it here on a whiteboard, but I think some of you are joining the board. Please don't kill it. And on top of that, you also earn silver. So for all your contributions that you make, you will earn silver. And those silver rewards will grant you the VIP that I mentioned here. So it's a lot of things that are affecting the residence gameplay. And there's like, you have to be quite sneaky because you want to place your residence in a place that you can gather a lot of rent boosts. So there's not a lot of people, but you also wanted to have a set of contributors or residents of that city that are helping the city win the jackpot. So it's a collaborative / individual gameplay, and it's quite tricky depending on how the other players set their residents and stuff like that. And actually this is alpha, and I'm ending here, and we can have some questions and answers, but we are essentially developing a quest system that helps boost the residence of players in a way that it's not just clicking and doing actions what gives you contributions, but it's actually daily quests and season quests that can give you a better boost on your earnings from the season pass. And we also want this to be linked with the more passive gameplay. So maybe people that have a lot of cities and that are big owners with a lot of capital on the game can somehow create guilds and have players playing on the season gameplay for them, or that they have a synergy with them and they both get rewards. But this is much maybe for next year or whatever, but the season quests and resident quests will be coming really soon. So that's everything. If you have any doubt, I guess you will have, because it's not easy to explain it over a word.
I think you did a good job, man. I think you did a good job. I really do think that.
Yeah, I don't think that the net score and rotation level is really easy to understand just by watching a whiteboard. But if you go over here, you can have a detailed overview on how it works. I think most of the players that already play Civitia know how it works, so
Perfect.
Let's go over some questions.
What I would like to know actually is you mentioned that there are a few strategies that you had in mind or that you'd thought of, obviously, whilst playing the game. I think it would be useful for some of the people to hear what those strategies are, maybe one or two from your side.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on as in any other hyper financialized game like fantasy, for instance, you start with a portfolio, let's say, and your goal is to make it the most. So if you start minting cities with no clue and no strategy, you will end up maybe not losing money, but it will not be optimal because you will end up paying taxes on the bonding curve. You will not earn a lot of yields because you will be diluted by the other holders. So you have to be careful, and Civitia is made somehow that it enforces people not to own, or it doesn't incentivize people to own a ton of cities that are not related. So actually the best strategy is to own less units, but to having them concentrated over a city where you will know that you will place your residence and you will be able to contribute a lot to it, and you are aligned with other people from a smaller community that you know they will be setting up their residence there. So the key question is, the most optimal way, I will say, is for you to own a lot of units of one city that you know there are true supporters there. And this is the cool part about Civitia. It's not just an individual game where you play your own and you just win. You have to collaborate or be smart with whom you mix with or with whom you try to make alliances, because this will basically turn into more profit or less, because the communities that are able to be together and always set the residents on the same city and contribute there, they will earn all of the jackpot or almost most of it, because they will be centered around contributing to their city and sabotaging all the other ones. So as you saw, the last season was basically dominated by just one city that got all those contributions and managed also to sabotage all the other ones. This is an example that if you are placing your residence for this season on Seoul and you have a lot of units, you will be earning a lot of jackpot and a lot of rent boosts from the city. So there's not like that's the cool thing, that as in any other DeFi protocol, there's no optimal solution. It is based on the feedback of the ecosystem and the other players that you can decide one strategy or another. And it's game theory in real time and with real capital. So I guess it's really cool. It's a good experiment to see how people form alliances and try to destroy other communities or align together. And yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting component to the game. I saw a lot of threads and a lot of information coming out from Killchain, who has been obviously a massive Civitia player. I know that he's here today as well, but I saw a lot of coordination from his side and other players that were playing the Civitia game to do exactly what you were saying, right? Like this whole coordinating a push, make sure that you get the lion or the king's share of the jackpot at the end of it. I think that's
correct.
It's gonna be interesting seeing that come out on mainnet, especially like now that it's not testnet money, it's real money. I think we're gonna see a lot more.
You will definitely see different types of flow of capital, because in testnet it is quite unlimited, but in mainnet, for you to farm, for example, a lot of contributions, you have to possibly incur on a loss. So you will be essentially having losses until you are able to hit the jackpot from your city and win. So it will be much more difficult to do or decide a strategy. On testnet, it's quite easy because you just hit the faucet and deploy all the capital to basically mint and burn, and get contributions to your city and sabotage the others. But in mainnet, it will be much more challenging because you have to optimize for you and your team or your group of people supporting a city.
Cool, thank you, man. There was a question that I saw in the chat as well, which is an interesting one for you to answer. And it's talking about, so the bonding curve obviously makes things more expensive as more users join the game, right? So
Yeah.
what are the mechanisms in place to stop things getting, is there a point that it gets so expensive that it therefore becomes difficult for new people to join the game? Like, what are the mechanisms in place to stop that?
Yeah, this is a really good question, and it's actually what we work most of the time on it. So if you want to make it sustainable, you need to have mechanisms such as the seasonal cities, which they are essentially resetting every season. So as I mentioned, the radiation on those cities increases over time, and at the end of the epoch, they are destroyed. So at the beginning of the next epoch, they start at zero means, and the price is therefore zero. And then you can mint these cities at the beginning of the bonding curve. So this is a mechanism to attract new players. It obviously is not the solution to that problem, but I think that this was mainly a product of the different things that are affecting testnet. In testnet, you won't see prices going down because you just hit the faucet, and init is not it's basically unlimited supply. But in mainnet, you will essentially see a more sustainable gameplay because people will take profits as always. And the different strategies, as I said, involve also burning cities, because if you start holding a ton of cities, it will get increasingly expensive to move over the board. So I don't think you will see a flow similar to what happened on testnet, which was cities going up only. And these two things will help a lot together with seasons, because seasons also enforce you to decide over a city. And why would you hold cities that you don't trust or that you are sabotaging if you are actually devoting to a city? It doesn't make sense that you hold a portfolio of a ton of cities if you are just trying to contribute to one of them. So I think it's a really cool question. It has no direct solution because the fun part about Civitia is that you cannot predict the outcome. You can try to deploy your strategy as in other trading environments. The team of Civitia comes from algorithmic trading, so most of these things are we got inspiration from markets. So I think it will be a balance, and cities will not go to infinite for sure, because there are incentives for you to burn a city rather than still holding and making it much more expensive for you to move over the board. Because actually, to keep your, I didn't mention that, but to keep your units active, you need to roll the dice on each daily epoch. So you are forced to move over the board, and if you are a Degen player, you are paying 10x a normal player, and you are forced to move, because if you don't move, your units are not active and you will not collect rents for that epoch. So this is another mechanism that enforces you to try to optimize for less cities, but concentrated around a place where you think you can maximize on seasons.
Bro, it's so well thought out. It's just so interesting to hear you talk it through, especially in this level of detail as well. And to be honest with you, like it's all very, it's all very, like, you're explaining it very simply as well. And I mean, for me, I played the testnet for maybe 10-15 minutes just to get my bearings. But from this call alone, I feel like I understand the game completely now. And there is just so many layers of just interesting, different strategies, different flywheels, different, just connections between the games that I hadn't even thought of before. So
yeah,
massive.
definitely. There is people that could just play Civitia for the Initia VIP if it starts to get interesting. So this is another flow that could exist. So if it's different if you want to optimize for this flow or for owning more cities. So that's where I say that there's no optimal solution to the problem unless you know the outcome. So you will say at the end of the season, oh, the best solution was to place your resident on New York because blah blah blah. But again, this is after this season ended. So you have to take your decision before and try to stick to your strategy and see if it's worth it and change it. But again, there is incentives in all the places that make it challenging for you. So one example could be if you have decided that you will place your residence on New York forever because you will stack the rent boost of loyalty, but then everybody leaves New York because something happens there or whatever. And what do? Do you liquidate all your units and try to move over? You will incur probably on a loss because there is a trading fee on the burning. So you have to be really careful, and actually it enforces you to take a bit of a social part and to gather around a community, because if you are on a city with people you trust, you are essentially one step ahead of the others because you will have more supporters that go along with you.
That makes sense. Thank you for that, G. There's another good question from popo.init who says, I still can't think of any way for new players who have come to play later to outscore players who have been playing since day one. Therefore, if a new player comes in and sees that others have already taken it far, will anyone want to come in and play? So essentially what I think they're asking is, if someone is already racking up the points and racking up their contributions and so on and so forth, why, why would a new player still come in to try and...
I think he's missing one point, or maybe I didn't explain it well, but the residence gameplay is reset every week. So it doesn't matter if you, for example, KP, have contributed last season, to New York a ton, because for the new season, you will still need to contribute to that season. So if you imagine you get a ton of the contributions and you are able to get 10% of all New York jackpot, because you contributed a lot last epoch. If you come this season and you don't play, you will get 0 contributions this season. And if I am a new player and I see that, I can come and mint 1 unit of New York and start contributing by playing. Actually, I will be able to mint seasonal cities super cheap because they are reset, and I will gather and stack contributions of New York, and you will get 0. So on the residence level, everything is reset every season. So if he is asking about the prices of cities, this is definitely a threat. But as I mentioned, there's a few things that influence you to burn cities. So you cannot hold 1,000 units forever, because I didn't mention other things, but if you land on this square that is coming soon, it is also an incentive you to own less. This new square also enforces people to earn less cities. So as I mentioned, the core thing is on the season level, everything is reset, and then on the base gameplay, which is owning cities, there is a lot of incentives for you not to own random cities, and therefore prices will not go to infinite as in testnet.
Cool, nice one, man. Thank you very much. And I believe your other team member has just answered his other question, but I think it's maybe useful just for you to say it out loud as well so that other people know it. But you said, so yeah, the score is reset every week, but the town on, the town that you're holding isn't reset. That's correct, isn't it?
Yes, it is reset. I mean, the amount of holdings, you mean? Let me see the question on. No, actually, you are not. I mean, the cities you own them forever unless you burn them. Mm-hmm. If they are normal cities, what is reset is the net score of the city and the radiation level. This is completely reset at every season, and the contributions of a single player. So he is correct in the part of that cities can get more expensive over time, but the key part there is that the mechanisms of the season make it you to be able to, by just owning a single city, you can make much more yield if you are active rather than the player that owns 100 units but doesn't contribute, because on every season it doesn't matter if you own 1,000 cities, 1,000 units of New York. If you are not playing, or if you are playing less, you will have 0 contributions and you will earn 0%. If I have just one city, but I am able to play a lot and do daily quests and also mint seasonal cities or land on special square, and I gather 1,000 contributions, and New York has a total of 100,000 contributions, I will be getting 1% of all the jackpot, and this player over here that owns a ton of cities will be getting essentially 0. So this season gameplay is not affected by owning a ton of seasons rather than just the rent boost itself, but you have to grind here. So players like Killchain, as you mentioned, are super grinders, and they understand that they have to be super active on a given season to win. It's not enough for them to own just 1,000 units. That's why you see Killchain won, because he was basically super active and grinding over the season, rather than just being a whale and owning a ton of cities. Being a whale and owning a ton of cities will not be worth it, and that's what will make the gameplay super sustainable, because they will have to burn at some point, because there's no incentive to hold cities if you are not playing or grinding on the quest level or on the basic gameplay level.
I love the quest idea. I really do. I think it'll be a whole new way to elevate the activity within Civitia, especially if you're doing, like you said, like daily quests and weekly quests. I did have a question, and I don't know whether you can answer it or not, so feel free not to. But you kind of just mentioned that there are quests. It would be nice to know, an example of what a quest could be for one of these daily quests, for example.
Yeah. So this will be not an easy task. So you will have season quests and daily quests. Daily quests can be as simple as just land on Rome and pay rent. So it's a quite easy quest. But then on the seasonal quests, which you can have the whole week to complete, there will be a level of quests. So if you are able to do more things, you will have a more advanced residence pass. That means that if one quest, for example, is to go to a seasonal city and mint it at the beginning of the season, maybe there's, I will not say details, but maybe there's a component that is how many of those seasonal cities you mint, or how many times you land on jail and are able to bribe the officer. So this is not just a single task, but maybe a stack of tasks that can give you a multiplier on the quest level. So as always, we try to build on public. We did testnet B1 and then testnet B2, which testnet B1 was essentially this gameplay over here, and B2 was the whole gameplay. And we gather feedback from the community. I mean, we are super happy that we have all these guys hearing right now at 10 a.m. in the morning here in Europe. And we gather a lot of feedback from the community. We are not super active on the Discord, that the mods are, like Jack Kiran is crazy active on the Discord, but we are always looking around and seeing inspirations and feedback. So all the feedback is welcome. We don't have the definitive solution to a perfect game, but the Residence Quest will also be will be also built in public. So we will have an initial release that is planned to go public on mainnet, and then we will iterate over it. And just to add, we are going to have a few more surprises before mainnet. So I think community will be definitely happy. Last week we announced Genesis cities, which are basically 100% airdropped to the community, but there's much more coming soon and much more great, I will say, for true OGs and players. So stick around and you will see definitely things that are not in this diagram, but will have an essential role in the game and the ecosystem.
Man, thank you for this, bro. This has been a lot of fun. I feel like I've not done any talking as well, which is a different one for sure.
I'm sorry. Also, my English is not perfect. I'm Spanish. I try my best, but
we understood,
yeah.
man. 100%. I didn't need to correct you at all, so no problems. We do usually wrap it up now. I don't know if anyone has any dying questions before we go. Just leave them in the chat. But yeah, no, thank you very much for your time, man. This has been very insightful, and I feel like off the back of this, a lot of people will have a shared interest now in Civitia. In fact, actually, is there anything for people who perhaps want to get involved now? Like, what can they do to begin getting involved in Civitia in the run up to mainnet?
Yeah, this is a tricky moment because you can go to the UI and actually look at the game, but you cannot roll dice and play because we essentially terminated the testnet because we wanted to have a snapshot of silver and true OG players before we announced that this testnet was actually incentivized. But yeah, I mean, they can definitely look at the board and see how it works. They can definitely go to YouTube and see because there's a lot of guides and they can look at the docs. I think it's not complex to understand if you don't play. And yeah, there's a ton of people making community guidelines on Twitter, content around Civitia, and we love it. It's the way to go. Community is everything now in crypto and has always been. So I think if we can have a game that is owned just by the community, it's definitely a pretty cool idea and will iterate over time in a much more sustainable way rather than other ecosystems that are basically gathered around the idea of having investors and making them rich. So yeah, contribute as much as you can, read around on Twitter, make guides for those of you that have played to help new people on board. And I think just wait for mainnet. It's coming soon, I guess. Depends on you guys, the Initia team, but we're happy to be here and answer any questions on our Discord.
The freeze. We'll make it happen, man. And I'm sure you'll make it happen too. This has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much, bro. I would encourage people to begin, like you said, like reading these docs, just getting to know the game, getting to know the economic features underlying it, because you don't want to just go into mainnet and start burning money because you've got no idea what you're doing, basically. And I think a good way to learn is to also try and teach others. So if you are looking to learn more about Civitia, I would recommend creating some threads on Twitter as well. because not only does it reinforce your understanding of it, you're then pushing it to more people as well. So I would really recommend that. And yeah, put it in the community, put it in the Twitter community that we've got. Remember, it's not a cult. And yeah, I think that's it. I think we're ready to wrap this up. Can we all give G a massive thank you from all of us? Because like you said, it is 10 a.m. in Europe. And
Thanks a lot to all of you, and it was a pleasure.
yeah, and really good fucking drawing, man, as well. You put a lot of time into that, I can tell.
Yeah, I was working on the weekend to make this diagram because I thought if I was starting to draw now, it would be a mess. And it
Oh,
showed
bro,
because my drawing is awful.
yeah,
So
yeah. We'd be here for hours.
yeah.
Watching you do it. Okay, well, yeah, that's it from us. I haven't seen any other questions coming in. So again, thank you for your time, G. Bad friend, we'll let you DJ and close us out here. Thank you very much for coming again, as always. And yeah, thank you everyone in the audience. 220 people. That's amazing, man. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. See ya.